Picture this, a cold stone cottage in the autumn of 1347. The air is thick with the earthy scent of damp wool and unwashed bodies. You are Margot, barely 15, your heart pounding in a chest weighed down by fear and duty. Outside, your new husband Henrik's friends shout drunken encouragement, banging pots and wooden spoons, their voices echoing like a cruel chorus. They won't leave until they hear proof. Proof that you, the bride, have been claimed, that the marriage is sealed. Inside this cramped, smoky room lit only by flickering candlelight, Henrik's rough hands fumble at the leather cord around your throat. The rushes beneath your bare feet crackle. Your fingers clutch the rough woolen shift your mother made, the same one her mother wore on their wedding night. You wonder, can you survive what's coming? The terror weighs heavy on your young shoulders. This isn't a story of love. It's a story of power, survival, and control during a time when intimacy was ruled by superstition and the church's iron grip. Welcome to the medieval bedroom, a battlefield where bodies were political territories, where every touch could mean salvation or doom. If you love uncovering hidden truths of history, consider liking and subscribing for more content like this. Before we dive into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, please drop a comment below to let me know where you're listening from. It's amazing to think that we're exploring these ancient tales together, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. The first night didn't start in the bedroom. It began with a ritual, the bedding ceremony. Guests dragged you and Henrik, singing bawdy songs, undressing you both, then waited outside the thin door, straining to hear the cries, the noises that would prove the marriage was consummated. The community's eyes and ears invaded what should have been the most private moment of your life. No privacy, no mercy. Then, like sentries guarding a fortress, these assembled witnesses stood vigil outside the door, listening intently for the sounds, the unmistakable cries of the bride, proof that your hymen, your supposed sacred barrier, was broken, the marriage consummated, and the union legitimate. Without that proof, you were nothing but a failed asset, a liability, disgraced, rejected, and exposed. Behind that door, your wedding night was governed by fears older than the stone walls themselves. In this moment, the concept of marital rape seemed absurdly foreign. You were, after all, property, an extension of your father's wealth, a living dowry. Your body was no longer yours. The church's grip tightened around every aspect of this intimate moment. Saint Jerome, writing centuries earlier, pronounced that a man who loved his wife too ardently was an adulterer, a warning that passion itself was dangerous. Sexual pleasure wasn't celebrated, it was feared and condemned. Thomas Aquinas, the towering medieval theologian, codified these beliefs in Summa Theologica nearly a millennium ago. He enumerated explicit rules regulating married sex. It was only permitted on certain days of the week and under circumstantially limited conditions. No sex during fasting periods, Lent, or pregnant and nursing states. The only proper position was missionary style, man on top, facing the woman. Deviate from this, and damnation awaited. Oral sex was forbidden outright. Sex during menstruation was not only taboo, but thought to poison both body and soul. Imagine the crushing weight of such restrictions, layered atop your now vulnerable body and mind. You had been taught by your mother and the village priest during confession. Failure to obey these edicts threatened eternal punishment. The church's iron will reach into your most private moments, demanding your soul's survival at the cost of bodily terror. Imagine, now, the fear that gripped you when Henrik reached for you on a prayer-forbidden day, a mere Wednesday during Lent. You were forced into an impossible choice: submit, risking damnation, or resist and risk your husband's wrath. Domestic violence was legal, even expected. You had no real escape. Medieval medicine was no solace. Women's bodies were considered flawed copies of men's. Doctors taught that the vagina was an inside-out penis. Ovaries were testicles hidden deep within, and that female pleasure required prolonged stimulation, multiple climaxes, to conceive. This misconception fueled horrific legal decisions. A woman couldn't get pregnant if raped, because she would not have derived pleasure. Courts twisted this to blame victims, accusing them of consenting to attack and sexual assault. Your mother might have recited warnings about the wandering womb, a terrifying belief that your uterus could move within your body, causing madness, hysteria, or death. Remedies ranged from fumigating your body with sweet or foul-smelling herbs to fumbling at the physical with no clear understanding grounded in science. Your world also straddled superstition and folk wisdom. Village wise women, not the learned monks or catechists, held secret knowledge of herbs and rituals. Pennyroyal and tansy brewed into dangerous teas that could prevent pregnancy. Amulets made from mandrake root shaped like tiny humans that were thought to increase fertility. These were acts of quiet rebellion against the church's official condemnations of witchcraft. You held these amulets, wrapped them close to your skin, hoping not only for God's favor, but also to outwit a universe that seemed aligned against your very survival. Virginity was your currency, perhaps more precious than any livestock or land your father owned. The hymen was misunderstood as a solid membrane, a physical wall to be breached. Blood on the sheets was public proof of your purity. Failing to produce this proof could lead to disgrace, annulment of the marriage, or worse, even death for fraud. Because some young brides feared losing everything, they faked it, pricking fingers with sharp needles, planting chicken's blood. What followed was an invasive ordeal. Church courts didn't just take whispers or accusations lightly. They were empowered to interrogate husband and wife separately, pry into intimate details, and even physically examine a bride for signs of penetration. Sexuality in the medieval world was never private. The community, the church, superstition, family honor, all triangulated to monitor, police, and control. In this crucible, the sounds of the night, the damp rustle of rushes beneath feet, the flicker of candlelight casting unsettling shadows, the clatter of pots and drunken voices, became the heartbeat of a culture where power and fear overshadowed affection and comfort. The morning light creeps hesitantly through small, dirt-smudged windows, casting pallid beams on the cold, unforgiving stones of your chamber. Margot's body aches in ways she cannot articulate. Tenderness is alien, her skin flushed from pain, sweat glistening on her brow. Yet, pain is not simply physical, but deeply spiritual and social. From girlhood to property overnight, you are now part of an intricate social web, babysitting the precarious balance between religious doctrine, economic survival, and communal expectations. Medieval medical authority was as chilling as it was misguided. Women were anatomically defective men, their genitalia inverted, their bodies designed for reproduction but flawed in essence. This medical truth wasn't idle conjecture. It was taught in universities throughout Europe, copied into manuscripts, passed down by learned men cloistered in cloaks of Latin and ritual. The consequences? Women's sexual needs, pleasures, and desires were dismissed or misunderstood. Female orgasm, while considered necessary for conception, became a liability, constantly scrutinized or weaponized. Perhaps the cruelest medieval misbelief was that rape could not cause pregnancy, because the woman must experience pleasure for conception to occur. Such a grotesque misunderstanding led to accusations against victims in courts when they became pregnant after assault, charged with partial complicity. The wandering womb, a diagnostic specter of medieval gynecology, haunted women's lives with terrifying consequences. This belief dictated that the uterus might roam, strangling the heart or attempting escape through the vagina. Treatments involved fumigation with aromatic herbs or foul smoke in hopes of coaxing it back. Rituals pregnant with desperation, yet void of efficacy. Pennyroyal and tansy tea leaves were steeped as contraceptives, their narrow margin between protection and poison a deadly gamble for women desperate to avoid unwanted pregnancy. Amid these dark realities, the wise women of rural villages carried hidden knowledge, passed through whispered generations. They wielded herbal remedies, mandrake root talismans, afterbirth rituals, amber charms, each a defiant plea against fate, each a secret hope for life beyond church condemnation. Virginity's heavy price bore down on every girl like Margot. The hymenal proof was a social contract. Church courts could and did investigate bodies and reputations to verify or condemn. Some brides smuggled chicken blood or self-inflicted pricks to satisfy the brutal proof demanded by families and communities. Behind every sheet was the fragile line between public honor and disgrace. Sexual positions, too, were scripted by theology and control. Missionary was the only safe position affirming male dominance. Positioning the woman on top was blasphemy. Rear entry was equated with bestiality. Oral sex was forbidden outright. Acts deviating from the divine natural order condemned as sins leading to eternal damnation. Yet beneath this surface of repression glimmered shadows of resistance. The bawdy poems of traveling minstrels, the ribald tales whispered in taverns, the secret gestures of those daring to experiment with forbidden pleasures. These hinted at a complex and vibrant undercurrent of medieval sexuality in defiance of strict dogma. The supernatural sealed the night for fear. Sexual demons, succubi and incubi, stalked bedrooms, stealing life force and corrupting souls. Sleep paralysis, now understood medically, was interpreted as a demonic attack, afflicting innocent victims with terror and paralysis, pushing them into the perilous edge of witchcraft accusations and social exile. Menstruation was a season of pollution and peril. Menstrual blood was believed poisonous, harmful to crops, utensils, and male virility. Thus, women were ostracized during their cycles, isolated in huts or outhouses, forbidden from churches or kitchens. This monthly exile underscored the pervasive fear and misunderstanding of female biology wrapped in a cloak of sin. The mortal dangers of childbirth loomed large over every woman's life. 1 in 3 women perished during or shortly after childbirth, an ever-present threat that shaped the desperation reflected in forbidden contraception, the hidden charms, and the secret rituals whispered in the shadows. Unwanted pregnancy carried social ruin and often tragic outcomes for mother and child, including exile or infanticide, an unspoken, desperate recourse. Sexuality was inseparable from social status and power. Men's potency symbolized honor and leadership. Impotence was devastating social ruin. Women's reputations were fragile, vulnerable to gossip and accusation. In the cramped, intertwined medieval village, where everyone knew everyone else's business, privacy was a luxury few could afford. Yet, despite these suffocating constraints, life and desire found cracks to seep through. Secret celebrations like May Day, folk rituals disguised in Christian festivals, and quiet acts of defiance persisted. Couples found moments to test compatibility. Young people bundled under boards, sharing space without risking dishonor. Sexual rebellion existed, hidden from the watchful eyes of church and community. Margot's story was not unique. It echoed in hushed voices throughout medieval Europe. Medieval marriage was never simply about 2 souls uniting. It was a contract brokered between families and sanctioned by God, a social and economic binding where the survival of the family name and land reigned paramount. Sex was strictly regimented. Church theology dictated when and how. Permission was narrow, regulating days for intercourse, acceptable sexual positions, and forbidding acts like oral sex or any excessive pleasure. Deviation was more than sin. It imperiled eternal salvation. Yet beneath the public facade, a secret world of sexuality brewed. Courtly love emerged as a literary fantasy, noble knights pining spiritually for unattainable ladies, in stark contrast to functional marriages based on practical necessity. Confessionals became places of surveillance and judgment. Priests interrogated parishioners in excruciating detail about their sexual acts, frequencies, and even sensations. The rise of the Inquisition brought torture and enforced confessions, weaponizing sexuality as a tool of control. Women bore the brunt of this oppression. Their biological functions, menstruation, pregnancy, childbirth, were framed as sources of sin and danger. Herbal contraception was a whispered secret, and the risk of accusation for witchcraft hovered over every private action. Punishments for sexual offenses were brutal and symbolic. Women caught in adultery could be confined in tiny cages, starved to death on public display, a grim deterrent. Men convicted of rape faced castration, with penalties varying by social class. These spectacles instilled terror, policing compliance within harshly patriarchal systems. Yet desire proved resilient. Nobility enjoyed privacy and riches that allowed more exploration of sexual pleasure, while peasants' bodies were arenas of survival and social control. Virginity and fertility were political acts intertwined with honor, a complex web of power, survival, and resistance. In this brutal world, Margot's silent struggle speaks across centuries. Intimacy has never been purely private or simply personal. It has always been deeply entangled in power, survival, fear, and rebellion. The candle dies, the room swallows the darkness. Margot's whispered strength remains, an enduring testimony to human resilience, desire, and the complex dance of control and freedom through history.